is up? And welcome back to Beyond the Arc with Brandon Silvers. As always, I am your host, Brandon Silvers, doing a college football orientation today. But first, if you are interested in the greatest weekly sports watch guide in the history of the world, check out the link to my blog, the show notes, down below in the literal show notes. All right, let's get into it. I love college football. It's fantastic. Even though my team, the South Carolina Gamecocks, rarely do anything to make me happy, I still find it all enjoyable. And I find doing my college football preview shows enjoyable as well. I like researching all the teams. It gets me hyped for the season. I like sharing what I learn with all of you and trying to figure out who's going to be good, who's going to be bad, and how much Texas A&M fans can hate me. I'm as good at it as anyone can be, since sports by nature are unpredictable, and I'm confident I know what I'm talking about. At least I was, but we are entering a new era of the sport this season, and we're all going to have to basically relearn everything we thought we knew before we can start being experts again. I can't tell you who's going to be good. Well, I can, and I probably will, but my confidence about the whole thing is much lower than it used to be. So instead of doing that, I want to talk about all the changes we're about to see this season and what they mean for the landscape as a whole, so we know what the hell we're watching and where we're watching it, so we can once again talk about what's happening on the field. At this moment, every team technically has an equal chance to win the national championship, including my Gamecocks. So let's talk about the newly expanded playoff season they'll be using to do that. Since the sport went to a playoff system in 2014, it's been a 4-team playoff chosen by a committee. A 4-team playoff was silly. If you're going to have a playoff, it has to be more than 4 teams. Well, starting this year, it's now a 12-team playoff. I did a guest spot on another podcast earlier this year where I forgot about this and had to pretend that I remembered. So how does a 12-team playoff work? Rankings are still going to be done by the College Football Playoff Committee. They sent out the 4-team playoff with a bang last year by skipping over Florida State after their star quarterback Jordan Travis got hurt. While I do agree with that decision, it wouldn't have happened under these rules because Florida State won the ACC. Conference championships matter in this new format because the 12 teams will consist of the 5 highest ranked conference championships plus the next 7 highest ranked teams. I do like this renewed importance being placed on conference championships. You should be rewarded for doing well in the regular season. I also like this because it screws Notre Dame. They are famously independent. They have no conference. Even if they go undefeated, they can be no higher than the 5th seed. There will be no buys for the Fighting Irish, no matter how handsome my girlfriend thinks Marcus Freeman is. Now, I'm sure if they're anywhere close to making it, no matter what kind of cupcake schedule they play, the committee will find a way to get them in by putting them 11th, but at least we won't have to see them past that first round. Now, I said put them 11th. That's the other implication of this conference championship automatic bid. As we'll discuss in a bit, we are down to 4 power conferences. The 5th conference championship bid goes to a group of 5 schools. If they're ranked in the top 12, they just get whatever seed they are. But unlike the rest of the teams, they don't have to be. If Liberty wins their conference and is ranked 23rd, they still get into the playoff as the 12th seed. The Power 4 schools are all fighting to be in the top 11 just in case they don't win their conference title. This balances out the preferential treatment that bigger schools get. But let's not get crazy. You still want to be a Power 4 school. They have these 12 teams with 5 conference champions. From that pool, the 4 highest ranked conference champions all get buys. They are automatically in the quarterfinals. These will almost certainly be Power 4 schools. These quarterfinal seedings of the top 4 teams will take place in existing bowl games, so the committee will take into consideration existing relationships between conferences and these bowls. So the quarterfinal bowls this year are the Fiesta Bowl, Peach Bowl, Rose Bowl, and Sugar Bowl. What does this mean? The Sugar Bowl has conference affiliations with the SEC and Big 12. Both conferences will almost certainly get a bye into the quarterfinals. Whichever school is ranked higher gets the Sugar Bowl quarterfinal game. It doesn't affect seeding or anything like that. Just the bowl game that is hosting the quarterfinal. Okay, so those four get buys. Seeds 5 through 12 play each other in the first round to see who advances. It goes exactly how you think. 5 plays 12, 6 plays 11, 7 plays 10, and 8 plays 9. There are no bowl games here, though. Instead, the team that's ranked higher hosts the game at their home stadium or the stadium of their choice. I love this idea of a home playoff game on campus. Even though students will be on winter break, it'll still be a great environment. Plus, if you maybe have a smaller stadium and you want to move to an available NFL stadium nearby to allow for more fans, you will have that option. Winners of these first round games obviously advance to the quarterfinals to face one of those top 4 teams in a bowl game. There will be no reseeding at any point. Quarterfinal winners move to the semifinals. That will be in the Orange and Cotton Bowls. And the national championship game will be at Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta. Moving forward, which round the 6 bowls get to host will rotate, and the site of the national championship game will change as well. All right, now that we know how the expanded playoff works, as well as how the conference play a role in all of it, we need to relearn the conferences themselves. Let's talk about this by how much sense realignment made for fans going from smartest to dumbest. We'll leave the Pac-12 out of it since they would automatically win dumbest by losing all but 2 of their teams. Yes, the conference still exists for now with Oregon State and Washington State. They're treated as a group of 5 conference. We must never talk about them again. Quick note, we are only discussing the Power 4 conferences, and they no longer do divisions in those conferences, no more East or West. The top 2 teams play for the conference championship the way God intended. Okay, the smartest conference realignment was done by the SEC. They added just 2 schools in Texas and Oklahoma. Geographically and culturally speaking, they fit right in with the rest of the conference. We may not be confident in picking teams that are good yet, but I'd be shocked if these 2 weren't. The Sooners won 10 games last year in Brent Venables' second season as head coach. They're bringing back 7 starters on offense and 8 on defense. They don't mind loading up the NIL bank for talent. That's even more true of Texas. They made it to the 4-team college football playoff last year and returned 8 starters on defense and 7 on offense, including Heisman candidate quarterback Quinn Ewers. He's got Arch Manning backing him up as well. 2 schools with a ton of football history and fan bases with high expectations who are willing to spend plenty of money to help them reach those expectations because they die to win a national title. It's absolutely insane. It's SEC football. They left the Big 12, which coincidentally is my second smartest realignment conference. Tough to lose 2 of the biggest programs in the nation, but they did bring in a lot. When I think of Big 12 football, I think of high-scoring offenses, indifferent defenses, and ranches. The teams they brought in all meet that criteria. UCF joined last season, so I can't dock points for that. Maybe they have a ranch at Disney World that I don't know about. Anyway, they brought in 4 former Pac-12 teams this offseason. Utah might actually win the conference in their first year here. Kyle Whittingham has been the coach there for 20 years, a rarity in college football that we'll talk about later. They won back-to-back Pac-12 title games before a down year last year with their quarterback Cam Rising out for the season with an injury. Well, he's back now and he's 25 years old. Old-ass quarterbacks have been running college football since COVID. Arizona is here now as well. The Big 12 usually has 1 or 2 true contenders and a bunch of middle-of-the-road teams that you don't think about until they play a team that you actually care about. That's Arizona. It's also Arizona State, who came over too. They almost made us care about them in 1996 when they came within 19 seconds of being national champions. Herm Edwards almost made us care again a couple of years ago, but instead got hit with a bunch of NCAA violations. Last but certainly not least, the Colorado Buffaloes returned to the Big 12. They were the loudest 4-win team in the history of college football last season, thanks to Deion Sanders. If this offseason is any indication, I don't think it'll get any quieter. So the Big 12 didn't replace the prestige they lost with Texas and Oklahoma moving on, but they do add a nice mix of 1 possible playoff contender, a team that will certainly get attention for at least this season in Colorado, and a couple of teams that fit the vibes, a net positive overall for the conference. Our last 2 conferences get negative grades from me for slightly different reasons. I suppose the Big 10 comes in third. Like the Big 12, they took advantage of the Pac-12 falling apart. They bring in Oregon, Washington, Southern Cal, and UCLA. Look, these are four great schools. Washington went to the national championship game last year, but they won't be as good after losing their coach and quarterback. But you've seen what their ceiling can be as a program. UCLA is obviously more of a men's basketball blue blood, but they've had some moments in college football. Their new coach is former Carolina Panther Deshaun Foster, and his offensive coordinator is Eric Bieniemy, who led the Chiefs offense to a couple of Super Bowls, but he couldn't get an NFL head coaching job because of cough reasons. Southern Cal is a team I have to see it to believe it with, particularly with their coach, Lincoln Riley, but they are the only program whose history can be talked about alongside the Alabamas and Texases of the college football world. And people braver than me consider Oregon as a national championship contender this year. They have a shit ton of Nike money in that program that makes it so they never really have to rebuild. Also, I do like Dan Lanning as a coach. So these are four fantastic football schools. However, in terms of how much sense it makes from a fan perspective, I just don't get it. Big Ten football is awful. It's boring. It's slow. It always looks cold. It's a chore to watch. Now you add these teams that are more about high-powered offenses, and I just don't understand how it all works. You're taking four teams who, when they're good, play a beautiful brand of football and pitting them against opponents who make games ugly. And the thing about a team like Iowa that's so good at playing ugly football is that they're contagious. They just take the air out of the ball and make you play ugly right along with them. They're not going to start slinging it around to try and keep up because they can't. We have less fun in college football because these teams are here now. It makes even less sense geographically. Big Ten football is Midwest football. They expanded a bit already and went east. Now they're doing a complete 180. Maryland has an away game against Oregon this season. That is so stupid. I've railed against conference realignment for a while now, but a huge part of what makes college football is how regional it is. It's fun and easy to hate your neighbor. By doing away with this, you are fundamentally changing what makes the sport awesome. And the conference didn't lose any teams, so now it's gigantic. There are 18 teams here. That's too many. You can only play half of the teams in your conference in a season like that. It's so silly. I get they're trying to win the conference arms race and chasing TV money and all that bullshit, but as a fan, I hate it. It's bad for the fans. So while they did add great programs, go to hell. Also, Michigan was a fluke last year who cheated to win it all, and that's why Harbaugh bailed. All right, as you may have guessed, the ACC comes in last here with the dumbest conference realignment of the offseason. They made all the mistakes the Big Ten made without the talent. Again, ACC stands for Atlantic Coast Conference. They bring in 3 schools. Let's start with Southern Methodist. Now, that school is located in Dallas, which I don't think of as an Atlantic Coast school, but you know what? Texas has the Gulf of Mexico, which is a sea of the Atlantic, so it does technically work. What doesn't work is the other 2 schools they brought in, Stanford and Cal. These are located as far away from the Atlantic as you can be in the United States. Miami travels to Cal for a conference game in October. That is dumb. The geography is stupid, and they don't even make up for it with football talent. None of these schools have mattered on a national level in a decade. Even worse, how do they begin to become a factor again? They can't. What was the point? It feels like they were just grasping at straws because they're scared of Clemson and Florida State leaving. Well, guess what? If they do, the conference is done. We've seen how this works. College football is king. The basketball history will not matter. It won't save it. Ask the Big East. Okay, now that we halfway know where the schools are going to be, who will be playing for them? Player movement is out of control, so we can't cover it all, but let's talk about some of the more interesting moves that took place this offseason. Also, I always like to point out, the way to slow down player movement is to give these kids contracts and treat them like the employees they are. But that would require the NCAA to do something smart, so I will not be holding my breath. Okay, the past 2 Heisman winners have been quarterbacks who have transferred. As a matter of fact, the top 3 vote getters last season were quarterbacks who had transferred. Seems to me we should probably start there. We just talked about the mass exodus of teams from the Pac-12 and how Washington State and Oregon State stayed. Well, their quarterbacks didn't, and they both find themselves in the ACC this season playing for teams that are actually on the Atlantic coast. I love a good comeback story, especially when it involves Dabo Swinney being on the wrong side of it. DJ Uiagalelei has the chance to make me very happy as he makes his return to the ACC to play for Florida State. He was supposed to be the next generational quarterback in Clemson's program. In fact, physically, he was the best of them all. He just never put it together, even in 2022 when his stats looked halfway decent. However, he did look more confident, especially as a passer, in his only season at Oregon State. He's still not what everyone thought he was going to be, but he's going to a program that did a great job of developing Jordan Travis. You may have forgotten, because I certainly did, but Travis started his career way back in 2018 at Louisville before he transferred to Tallahassee. FSU's in-state rival Miami got their own transfer QB in Cam Ward. He's averaged nearly 280 yards passing per game, over 25 career starts at Washington State for their high-powered offense. The Miami offense has been decidedly not high-powered under Mario Cristobal. Can Ward help? The U is a lot like the Miami Heat in that they are always rumored to land a superstar. Ward isn't that, at least in terms of name recognition, but he's very good. Can he be their Jimmy Butler? Again, Cristobal is no Eric Spoelstra, so he'll have his hands full, but I do like college football a little bit more when the U is the U. The superstar quarterback Miami was rumored to get was Will Howard of Kansas State. Instead, he'll be at Ohio State. Given the recent history of both programs, how is this even a rumor? He'll be joined by former Ole Miss running back Quinshon Judkins, who averaged 1,300 yards and 15 touchdowns a season in his 2 years playing for Lane Kiffin. Travion Henderson is already at Ohio State, and he's an absolute monster as well. Buckeyes are stacked, particularly on offense. They are the only non-Pac-12 team that can score just as much, if not more, than the Pac-12 refugees. If they don't win the national championship this year, Ryan Day is going to have to assume a new identity. New Big Ten member Oregon makes up for the loss of now Denver Broncos starting quarterback Bo Nix by bringing in Dylan Gabriel. He was at Oklahoma the past couple years, and he started his career at Central Florida, and he's been great at both places. This will be the most talent he's had to work with. And finally, Riley Leonard goes from Duke to Notre Dame. He was incredible as a sophomore, threw for 20 touchdowns and ran for 13 more as the Blue Devils won 9 games. That's like 3 seasons of wins for that program. Last year, he was banged up and awful. He originally got hurt in Duke's loss against Notre Dame, and he was never the same player after that and ended up shutting it down. It looks like he's had 2 surgeries to fix that ankle injury since transferring to Notre Dame, which is probably not great news. Notre Dame just did this with Sam Hartman, another injury-prone ACC quarterback who lit it up when he was able to play. How'd that work out last season in South Bend? Oh, right, not good. And look, we just talked about how Notre Dame has to be in the top 11 to make the playoffs. And if it's even close, the committee will find a way to put them in. But as up in the air as everything is, I have to see it to believe it that this is even a top 20 team. All right, let's move on to the impact coaching changes. Might as well start with Leonard's coach at Duke, Mike Elko, who is now at Texas A&M. Aggie fans were pissed at me and Brett during the season preview last year because we were trashing their entire coaching staff. Turns out they were so bad that boosters raised all of Jimbo Fisher's buyout money before the season ended and presented it to the athletic department at midfield during halftime of a game with one of those giant Publishers Clearinghouse checks. We'll always make fun of them for that and everything else that school full of weirdos does with their football program, but I'm sad to say I like the Elko hire for them. He's got his hands full with the fan base and with Texas joining the SEC. But again, if you can win at Duke, you're doing something right. Both teams from last year's national championship game have new head coaches. Remember this when coaches whine about players doing what's best for them? Jim Harbaugh left Michigan to go back to the NFL and coach the Chargers. I can't think of anyone less LA than him. He's replaced by Sharon Moore, who cried for Harbaugh on national TV after filling in for him during his suspension. Men should absolutely cry. I'm a firm believer in that. I'm also a firm believer in not crying for Jim Harbaugh. For that reason, I am out on Sharon Moore. Michigan will manage to remain relevant, but Washington will not. Jed Fish comes in from Arizona, but none of that matters. What's more important is the man he took over for, Kalen DeBoer, is headed to Alabama. DeBoer is probably the best coach in the country. What he did at Washington was incredible. He's won at every level he's been, but this is different. This is Alabama. Not only is he dealing with real expectations for the first time, but those expectations are national championship or bust. He's also replacing the most iconic coach of my lifetime of college football in Nick Saban, who won 6 national championships at Bama. He led them to the playoffs in 8 of the 10 years the playoffs were a thing. And you know what? That still wasn't good enough for Bama fans. As all things college football have been microwaved to take place faster, you got to win now and win big. There is no adjustment period anymore, especially not at Alabama. I'm interested in how DeBoer handles that. Now, the final change we'll discuss is the one that might be the most upsetting to me. We have all this new information to take in and evaluate so we can be knowledgeable about this new era. Well, where do we take it in? The TV stations have changed. I don't even know if we call them TV stations anymore. Channels? What do we call them if it's on a streaming service? I don't know. The big change is who gets SEC games now. For my entire college football watching life, the big SEC games have all been on CBS. You know when you hear that dun da da dun da 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 dun that you are about to see some of the greatest college football this country has to offer. Not anymore. Now CBS has Big Ten games. You know how I feel about that conference, even with these new teams that understand offense. You think I'm fired up to watch Iowa, Penn State, or some other snooze fest on CBS when it's been a lifetime of good college football there? SEC games are now on ESPN and ABC, which isn't a huge change because they've covered them before. The big risk with this is now it's becoming that much harder to watch good college football games without being subjected to Pat McAfee. So brace yourself, and there you have it. That's everything you need to know to start figuring out what's going on with this new era of college football. I hope to resume actual previews next season, and of course, I will still be covering college football right here and over at my blog, The Show Notes. Subscribe to get the free weekly watch guide screenshots where I'll tell you which sporting events you need to tune into. Link is below in the literal show notes. Spoiler alert, there will be a lot of college football in there. Also, I'll probably write some one-offs as well in the sports section. This has been another episode of Beyond the Arc with Brandon Silvers. As always, appreciate you watching, listening, rating, subscribing, reviewing, and sharing. Hope you have a fantastic week, and I will catch you later.